Hey everybody, Canadian Operator here. Today we're going to be continuing my training series and we're going to be talking about how to store your restricted and prohibited firearms safely. Now, if you haven't seen my video already, I have done one on non-restricted firearms, so you can check that out up there, as well as a variety of other videos that I've made. I'll also link my training playlist, so if you just want to watch all of these in a row, then you can go ahead and do that as well. So let's go ahead and talk about how to store your restricted or prohibited firearm. Now, storing both of these classes of firearms is going to be pretty much virtually identical. There's going to be one exception, which we'll talk about a little bit at the end, but generally speaking, it should be pretty much identical between the two classes. Obviously, it'll be different than storing your non-restricted. It's going to be a little bit more restrictive, as the name implies, but it's pretty straightforward, and I'll make sure to link the RCMP article down below so you can go ahead and follow along with that if you'd like. Alright, so the first thing you need to do to store your restricted or prohibited firearm is to prove it's safe. Now, if you haven't seen that video, I did one on pistols and on rifles. You can check them out up there in the top right hand corner of the screen. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say prove, it's an acronym that's basically been ingrained in us in our Canadian Firearm Safety Courses, which basically just means point, remove, observe, verify, and examine the steps to prove that a firearm is safe. So I've got a little firearm here with me. This one is a little pistol. It's an airsoft gun, chambered in 6mm. It is my little Beretta 92 FS clone, really cool one. I actually used this in a previous video of mine as well. And so in order to prove this safe, we're going to go ahead and point it. We're going to go ahead and remove any cartridges. And also we're going to observe the chamber to make sure that's clear, verify the feeding path, and examine the bore. And I know that seems a little, I don't want to say childish, but it's something that you know when you teach a kid to do something, you're teaching them with abbreviations and things that make it easier to remember. Well, newsflash for you, when you're getting a bit older, it becomes harder to remember things, and being able to, remember it by means of an acronym or something else that's easy to remember, it's not just good for people that are getting a bit older, it's good for everybody. It helps to build sort of muscle memory in your brain, so to speak, to remember what to do every time you come into contact with a firearm. So that's going to be the first step that you're going to need to do, whether you have a pistol, a rifle, or anything else. Whatever it is, as long as it's restricted, non-restricted, prohibited, anything in between, you always want to make sure you have a nice clear firearm. But for the purposes of this video, for storing that firearm that's restricted or prohibited, you do need to make sure that it's clear. You can't store any ammunition inside loaded in the firearm. Okay, that's very important. All right, the next thing is that we're going to need to put a secure locking device on here. And what I mean by that is you can do one of two things. You can do a trigger lock, which is sort of a mechanism, like a sandwich of two mechanical parts that is locked together by like a little crossbar in the middle. And basically what happens is that kind of locks in like that, and that goes around your trigger and prevents any access to that trigger. I really don't like that, and I'll show you in a minute why. Now, the other option is we have this little cable lock here, and I have one with me because I totally prefer these things. These are amazing. They are usually very well built. This one works on a key, which I like as well. And these are fantastic. They're very strong, they're durable. And the reason why I like these more than a trigger lock is because they actually prevent the action of the firearm from working, which is really, really good. It's just much safer. So remember how I told you that the trigger locks work, right? They come in from both sides. So let's just pretend that we have this trigger lock on. It's on both sides of the trigger here, of the trigger guard, and there's no access to the trigger whatsoever, right? So theoretically, we can have our magazine here, and there's no rounds here. We do have a little green gas in there, right? So we can put a magazine in the firearm with that trigger lock on, okay? We're able to load a round into there if we wanted to, right? That trigger lock's not going to stop the action from working, right? So we can do that if we want to. We can rack the slide. And then ultimately, if we have that trigger guard on there, remember there's a crossbar going between from the left to the right side of the trigger guard, and that crossbar, if that's loose enough, you can eventually pull it back to where that's going to pull the trigger. And that is not a good day for anybody, not for you, and potentially also not for the person who gained access to your firearm that should not have had access to your firearm. The reason why I like this is because this, like I said, it stops the action of the firearm from working. So we're going to go ahead and put that through. Now this one's a little bit short. You can get these in longer configurations that'll work with a pistol. There's ones that'll go literally all the way through, straight through the barrel and out, and all the way through the magwell. But as you can see here, there's not much we can do with this, right? I mean, we can pull the trigger if we wanted to, but that doesn't matter if we can't load the magazine in there, right? We could probably maybe potentially put a round in there if we wanted to, but we couldn't close the slide because, well, this cable's in the way, right? So that's preventing the firearm from mechanically working the way that it was designed to work. And in so doing, regardless of whether you can pull the trigger, I mean, we can drop that slide and pull the trigger all we want, and it's not going to do anything at all. And so that's why I think these things are absolutely amazing, and why I would recommend those over a trigger lock. So that is the next thing that you need to do. Step number 2, after you unload and prove your firearm safe, you need to put a secure locking device on that firearm. So the last thing that we need to do to store our restricted and prohibited firearms safely is going to be to store those firearms as long as they've been unloaded and fitted with a secure locking device in a locked vault, safe, or room that can't be easily opened or broken into, and that was designed for the purpose of storing firearms safely. Now, the reason why I say that in those specific words is because that's exactly how it's written, and you can reference that in the article that I've put in the description of the video, and that is basically the way that you're going to lock your firearms away. Now, there is one little caveat, as I've mentioned at the beginning of the video, and that's going to be for automatic firearms, which of course will fall into the prohibited category, and they've been prohibited for about 3 or 4 decades now. So there's nobody that is allowed to have these things, and the only people who do are people who have had them when they were legal, which was probably sometime in the 70s, and do correct me if I'm wrong on that. So the caveat in that is you basically have to follow all of the different steps that we outlined today, but in addition to that, you also need to remove the bolt or the bolt carrier group, and you need to store that away from the firearm in a different location. And that's about it, guys. It's very straightforward. Just make sure your firearm is unloaded, make sure you've got a locking device on it, store it in a safe, a room or a vault that is locked, not easily opened or broken into, and designed for the purpose of storing your firearm safely. And if you happen to have a prohibited automatic firearm, also make sure to remove that bolt or bolt carrier group and store that elsewhere. So I hope that that's been helpful for you, and I do appreciate your comments down below. It always helps me to come up with more ideas for videos just like this. I read and respond to every single comment that I can, and so I do very much appreciate your thoughts. If you want to share your thoughts a little bit more in depth, we do also have a Discord server that you can join. Link for that will be down in the description. And of course, if I've missed anything, feel free to let me know as well. Now, if you find this kind of content really helpful and you want to help my channel grow, the best way to do that is just to become a subscriber. It's totally free. Liking and sharing the video is also a huge way of getting this kind of information in front of more people, and this is really how we're going to have the movement of changing sort of everybody's perspective, and not necessarily talking people into becoming firearms owners, but just changing the narrative and letting them know that, you know, we're not bad people. We're here to have a good time and enjoy ourselves and do so safely and responsibly. And the more people learn about what it takes to be a firearms owner in Canada, then I think there will be a lot more understanding, and the culture will be able to be a little bit more sustainable. That being said, thank you so very much for watching. I very much appreciate you, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.